Hey everyone, welcome to the live stream. This is the Tuesday night Money with Me live stream. Today we're going to talk about how to do a mid-month budget check-in. And just to give a little overview of what we're going to work on. I'm going to share a tip about cash versus accrual accounting. And it sounds scary, but it's very straightforward. Just a tip about how to categorize your transactions if you're ever unsure based on the timing of the transaction, which month it should be in. We're going to talk about where does money go after the budget. So kind of the next step for budgeting if you are saving money is then keeping track of that money and making sure that your cash management system is able to capture that and make sure that it's going where you intended it to go, whether that is, to a savings account or if it is for a sinking fund. So sinking funds, if you're unfamiliar, that's when you have a big expense that's coming up, and instead of, just trying to pay for it in 1 month, you get to spread out the cost of it essentially into different months. So you start saving up for it a little at a time. Mandaraj, welcome. Audrey, just barely finished eating dinner, LOL. Welcome. We haven't eaten yet. I just got a cup of tea, but I think it's probably still too hot to eat. I'm going to try not to spill it all over myself and knock it over. But yeah, cup of tea. So we're going to talk about where your money goes after the budget, so cash management. Then we will do the mid-month budget walkthrough. So I'll share my spending as of today. I'll share my spending actuals and compare those to our budget and make sure that we are in line, kind of do a little analysis there. And then we will do I was planning 2 live work sessions, so 5-minute silent work sessions. I was thinking the first one, as always, feel free to work on whatever you need to work on. But if you're looking for a prompt, a good one would be categorizing your spending. So just going through your spending so far for the month and making sure that either the bank categorized it in the correct category or changing it to be in the correct category. We will regroup after the work session. We will then do work session 2. Would be comparing actual spending versus budget. So doing the same a little analysis that we're going to do together on my personal budget. There'll be time at the end for questions, but feel free to ask them as we go. And yeah, so it looks like Andrew's here too. Andrew, hello. Budgeting, but Roxanne, why should I budget for necessities? Oh, why should I budget for necessities like Louis Vuitton and filet mignon? I love this, filet mignon and Louis Vuitton. But yes, you do need to budget, Andrew. Get it together, man. Do you do a budget? I don't know that I've ever heard you talk about budgeting on your channel. So to be honest, I did not budget for the longest time. I strictly did cash management and income and expense tracking, so like tracking spending and reviewing spending. I do think a budget is a good tool for communication. A few years ago, my husband and I started putting a budget together, and it's been really nice to kind of coordinate our spending and kind of get more on the same page. So I think that budgeting has its place, and I think it's a useful tool, which is why we go over it. But yeah, so talking about cash versus accrual accounting. So sometimes you have situations where the spending, like when the cash leaves, isn't in the same month as the purchase. And so then, you might find yourself asking, oh, well, which month does this go in then? A really common one is with credit cards. So let's say you're spending throughout the month on a credit card, but money isn't going out of your account. And then the following month you get billed for it all at once. And so the cash goes out the following month. So which month do you put the charge in? So I usually recommend for personal finance that you just do cash basis accounting. And all that means is if the cash when the cash goes in and when the cash goes out is when you actually record it. So that can cause a little bit of confusion when you're budgeting. If you're going to do it that way, you need to remember to account for your spending from the previous month, and then the spending that you're planning to do this month will actually be, going out the next month. So it gets a little tricky, but like I said, when the cash actually goes in or out, that's the month that we would enter the transaction in. And this might happen with income as well. If you are, well, reimbursements wouldn't be income. Yeah, so I don't know if that really applies as much for personal finance, but let's see. Andrew says, yes and no. I track my spending, but don't budget. I have noticed if budgeting, I end up spending more. So is that because like there's dollars there that could be spent, and so you feel like, oh, I need to spend those budget dollars? That happens in companies all the time. People are like, oh, we need to use up our budget dollars, and so that way we can justify spending the same amount in the future. If I budget, geez, I can't spell. That's okay. I know what you meant. Yeah, I've noticed that too. If we have a budget, then yeah, I feel a little bit more compelled to spend it. But I will say it has been helpful from that same standpoint of, if you're trying to relax spending and not be such a like crazy uptight person, then having a budget and giving yourself permission to spend a little money, I think is a helpful. I think that's a helpful use case for the budget as well. And that's been helpful for me. Like I've said, I was really frugal when I was younger, and like I'm not allowed to spend any money. And if you're not going to spend any money other than like your bills, you don't really need a budget, right? Because you could go through and say entertainment $0. You could say travel $0. You could go through and fill it out, but really, what's the point if you're just trying to spend as little money as possible? I think that if people have a spending problem, like addictions to spending, then it might be helpful to like tone down your spending compared to just going cold turkey. I don't know. I'm curious. Mandraj, do you want to weigh in? Do you keep a budget? And yeah, I'm just curious, kind of pros and cons. Like I said, I do budget now and find it pretty helpful. Yup. I would allocate X dollars per thing and felt like I would need to hit that dollar amount. Yeah. And I think that that's pretty common too, which, if you are trying to like step down your spending a little at a time, maybe that's a good thing. It's not quite as hard as, just cutting to zero, essentially. Okay, so where does money go after the budget? All right, so let me go ahead and share my screen here. I have pulled up my budget examples. And now that I'm looking at this, let's actually flip the order. I'll go ahead and walk through how to update my budget with actuals and just go through and enter my actual spending. And then we'll go through and say, okay, where does money go after the budget? Because then we'll kind of have an example for October, and we'll take those dollars and say, okay, here's where they would end up when it comes to cash management. So I haven't shared our incomes on here before, but I do go through and update our expenses. So I pulled in this little screenshot on the right here. This is actually from our Mint account. I categorize everything in Mint. So just took a little screenshot so that way it'd be easier to enter on here. So food spending, it looks like we have had $146.89 so far this month. Charitable giving was $34.44. It's in here at gifts and donations. And see, this is kind of what I was talking about, as like it's helpful if your categories match exactly between your budget and then the categories that you're using in whatever app you use for tracking your spending. Health and fitness, we had 20. For home, we haven't had any. Transportation, we haven't had any. We're home all the time. Personal care, none. No pet spending. I probably will have to buy dog food before the end of the month, and we might have pet boarding too, dog boarding. Utilities, none so far. Most of them go through at the end of the month. Like we just paid our water, HOA, that kind of thing. Travel, we've had a bit. That was a camping trip. And then we pay storage for our camper right now because it's a whole thing trying to get it in and out of the garage. So don't ask because we don't want to know. Shopping, we've had $76.24. Fees, none. We only pay the fee for our taxes once a year. And entertainment, $12.99, which was Netflix. Education, $0. So it should be that easy. It should take you like 5 minutes to update this and to be able to see how you're doing. Now, the analysis piece of it does take a little bit more time. So like I mentioned on here before, I like to do percent of the month. So far, we're 13 days into a 31-day month, right? 31 days. So we're 41.94% of the way through the month. So if any of these numbers are like over 42%, that tells me I'm running hot, or I've already spent, or if it's more than 42%, that tells me we're running hot and we need to either reallocate from other categories or just taper back our spending in that category. So we've spent 21% of our food budget. Like I said, we could have spent up to 42% of it. Charitable giving, we're at 12% of the way through our budget, 13% for health and medical. And now this can get a little wonky if you like haven't paid your rent yet for the month. Like it would say like home is like 0% of budget when, you pay it all at once, or most people. I've never heard of anyone making multiple payments. Has anyone heard of that? I think I just made that up. Audrey says, I was doing cash envelopes. It's sort of spending limits. Okay, I get that. Yeah, you have like some restraint. It's like setting that initial budget amount, essentially, if you are setting aside the cash. So, oh yeah, I do remember you telling me that. And then you had to, when coronavirus happened, kind of stop doing that. Okay, so same thing, travel. I don't know if we're going to get to do our anniversary trip. We were hoping to go to Idaho, and I don't know. Also, I realized that we probably wouldn't be able to do like a Halloween trip either, because if we are able to go to Idaho, we should do it like a quarantine when we get back, because that would be moving states. So I'm not sure where this will end up. I think we're probably going to spend less in travel than we had planned, which means we're coming out way ahead. Over in shopping, and this actually is the issue with the credit card thing. I'm guilty. I forgot that Mr. Finance Rocks had bought 2 t-shirts and a video game, I think is what it was, on Amazon. And our Amazon is our only card that isn't linked to Mint. So like we don't see the transactions going in and out like I was talking about. So that's one that is always delayed. And so trying to remember it, yeah, it's a whole thing. We are still way under budget for the year. So year to date, what was that? Year to date spending as of 9/29. I don't think that's correct. So I wrote down that our year to date spending so far is 19,338.54. So maybe that was just an example. Oh, okay. So I had updated it to include what I thought October spending would be. So our actual year-to-date spending is $19,338.54. Our annual budget is $40,000. So still way under budget considering we're in October. Yeah, so we've spent $532 so far this month. So yeah, that's all I would do right now for just a mid-month budget check-in, just to make sure that spending is under control. I probably would, let's see here. We could reallocate dollars now, but like I said, I'm certain that travel is going to be less than I had hoped and planned. So that's going to more than cover being $16 over in shopping. So I probably won't change the budget right now, but maybe next week when I look at it, I'll update it just for the sake of it being in balance. Any questions on updating that? Mandaraj said, I still do it only with my checking account in Google Sheets. Okay, so you are still tracking the categories then. That's good. I don't know why I did this. That's good. That's fantastic. Thank you. Yeah, it's pretty great being so far under budget. Makes life pretty easy. So let's talk about where money goes after your budget. So I am going to just go ahead and fill in some numbers on here. Let's pretend now that it's October 31st. So it is the end of the month. Let's say we made a total of $3,000. Oh, and of course my spreadsheet is not up to date. Okay, I need a subtotal there. That didn't work. Okay. All right. So let's say that we spent or that we made $3,000, and let's say that we spent an even $2,500. So I did that the wrong way. Oh, 2,000. Okay, getting closer. Sorry, just making my spreadsheet do what I want. So 468. I'm going the wrong direction. What is happening? Oh, 2,500. Okay, forgive this. Please forgive this. I'm just going to clear this out. And let's just pretend that that's spread out between the categories, because apparently my spreadsheeting is rough tonight. So it's October 31st. We made $3,000. We spent $2,500. So maybe we had a category in here for savings and said we're going to send $500 to our emergency fund, for example. So let's go over now to my little cash management tracker. I don't remember if I have shared this on here at all before or not. But what essentially would happen is when you came in here to update how much cash you currently have. So this is, this is cash from an accounting perspective, which includes checking, savings, paper cash, and certificates of deposit or CDs. So you would come in here on October 31st and you would just add your current balances for everything. So let's say no changes happened to your checking account. The $2,500 went in and went out. So you still have $2,000 in there. We had $500 left over at the end of October, and we said we sent that to savings. So now this would be $2,000 because as of the start of the month, it was $1,500. We add $500 here. No changes to paper cash, just saying that everything we spent was on our debit card or whatever. And CDs, let's say 0. Does that make sense? That is just filling in how much cash you have as of today. Okay, I was just checking for comments quick. All right, so credit card balance. I do use a credit card. I don't know if you guys know that. I think I have mentioned it on here, but we use a card, but we pay it off in full at the end of every month. So we only use it in order to get like cash back, essentially. Therefore, I always subtract my credit card balance off of my cash. So that way I know like how much cash I actually have available. So for the sake of this, I'm just going to leave it the same, even though like you might have put $500 on and taken $500 off. So it might have netted out in the first place. And okay, so maybe I should back up here. The whole point of cash management and cash flow tracking and reporting is to answer the question, is the amount of money I have right now enough to cover my current obligations? So when I talk about how I didn't necessarily budget when I was, going to school and then when we were paying off debt. I did do this analysis quite frequently of saying, here's how much cash I have. Is it enough to cover my current obligations? If the answer was no, I would simply go into like no spend emergency savings mode. If I answered that question, yes, I do have enough money to cover my current obligations, then I would add new goals to this little tracker. So it's very simple, really. So it kind of ends up mattering. It matters what your standards are for yourself. When I was broke and unemployed, when I hit $200 in my account and I decided to stop looking at it because I was afraid to actually run out of money, I decided then that I was never going to have less than $950 ever again. And that's like life or death money. If I never end up using it, it can go towards my funeral expenses. So essentially what you want to do is come in here and update what are your current obligations and what's your like bare minimum for how much money you want and need to have. Audrey says me too. Okay, so let's say right now you're fine with having a bare minimum of $950 as kind of your like main emergency fund. And you always want to have $50 in your checking account, so that way you just don't have to worry about bouncing checks. The one other thing that I did after I filled my emergency fund, that first one, I realized I need to actually always have more than $950 to always have $950. Because you hit 950, that threshold, and you're like, woohoo, and then you're like, oh yeah, that means I have no actual spending money. So that was when I decided I always wanted to have 1 month ahead, like just have 1 month's worth of spending at all times. So that was like my second tier need to have. This is the standard for my life, and I expect myself to not spend this money. Like I need to always have it. Therefore, you would add in here, whatever 1 month of expenses is. I've seen some people do this and they just use their fixed expenses. So that's, just like their rent and basics. So not including like food and fun spending. But I do like to use the actual, like my legitimate, like average spending, including those. And the reason why is because I just don't want to have to fuss around with weekly budgeting, budgeting by paycheck. Like I established this system for myself when I was going to school. So I was going to school for full-time, working full-time, and I just legitimately didn't have the time or energy to get to that level of granularity and detail all the time. It was just easier for me to say, okay, if I don't have this $2,000, I need to stop spending money. So that way, all I had to do was look at my bank balance and know right away by subtracting the emergency fund and 1 month off, whether or not I needed to scale back spending or, like I said, add goals. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. So the formula on here is cash minus credit cards minus emergency funds minus 1 month set aside for being 1 month ahead with your spending. Now it says, do I need emergency savings mode? If this number was negative, that would be my signal to myself that I need to just stop spending money. Now this is where, like, if you're doing a budget, maybe you don't necessarily need to do the 1 month of spending in here. So it kind of depends on how you want to do it. This is just how I did it. And how I think it's helpful for tracking cash on hand. Oh my God, I'm talking so much. Okay, so after I had the emergency fund basics covered and 1 month ahead, the next thing I did was starting to add kind of my wants, things that I wanted to start saving up for. And then also, like I mentioned at the beginning, sinking funds. So if you want to have set money aside each month instead of like we pay our property taxes once a year now, twice per year, and it's $1,600. So instead of saying, okay, I'm just going to have no other money this month and put, $1,600 into that, you can just like start setting money aside. And then this is where it would go after you budget. So that way you remember that money is set aside for your property taxes and it doesn't get spent on something else. Hopefully that makes sense. So this is just, like I said, this is looking at how much cash do I have? Is it enough to cover my current obligations? So once I had the emergency funds 1 month ahead, then I added goals and then also upcoming cash needs. I got to the point where I said, okay, if I have any big expenses coming up over the next 3 months, I just want to have the cash now. Like, I don't mind holding the cash a little while to make sure that I'm not like in a pinch in like within the next like couple months. So that's really it. So it's your upcoming cash needs, your goals, and then when you get to the bottom of this, it is your legitimate spending money, spendable money. So this is, you might look at this and say, oh, well, if you're not using tracking, you might look at this and say, oh, I have $4,500 that I could spend. That's great. But then, once you subtract out emergency funds, upcoming needs, your sinking funds, you might get down to the bottom and say, oh, I actually only have $1,000 that I could actually spend. And so this is how I kind of worked my way up for my emergency funds. Because like I said, I started with just the $950. And then I was like, oh, I want to add a job loss fund of, 1 month. So I might come in here and say, I want to start having $2,000 for that. It turned my number negative, which means that's the signal to myself that I need to stop spending money in order to get that new like standard for myself, to get that money saved up. So I'm going to zero that out. Like I said, if you have extra money at the bottom, you can add goals. So like, let's say, oh, I have $1,000 of spendable money. What do I want to spend it on? Then you can go back through a second time and get this number down to zero, just like you would for a zero-based budget, saying, okay, this is how much money I want to have for everything. And then you can do a second pass and say, oh, well, this is how much money I actually have saved for each of these things. So you might come in here and say, okay, I'm going to set aside 500 of that for my upcoming auto insurance. And then I'm going to set 500 aside for my upcoming Mexico trip. And then voila, zero at the bottom. So that means that you had, how much cash did we have here? I don't include a total here because it's a little bit of a psychological trick. Like, I don't want to actually see how much cash I have available because it's not really available. Like, it might be money I legitimately don't want to touch. Oops, what have I done? Oh, I forgot my, let's see. So just to do the quick and dirty math, what is happening today? Oh, you guys aren't judging me my spreadsheet math right now, are you? So we have $4,000 in our checking and savings accounts, and then we have filled in $4,000 worth of obligations. So getting to zero at the bottom is just an overall psychological trick of saying, oh, I don't actually have a bunch of money that I can just go and spend. Like, the money in my checking account is for each of these specific things. And that just helped me to manage how much money I had. And like I said, it was the trigger for, do I need to stop spending or do I need to add new goals to my finances? Okay, I have talked so much, my goodness. Do you have school tax? School tax meaning like for university, like for going to School, so part of our property taxes, I think, goes to the schools, if that's what you mean. Hopefully I understood that question correctly. But yeah, so that would be included in the $1,600 every 6 months for property taxes. Once again, I do like to include a notes column on here. Just kind of helps me remember like how much I need to save by when, and then like what the purpose of my emergency fund is, because I'm big into having why and like a solid purpose behind your emergency fund instead of just having an arbitrary $1,000, because it's just more meaningful to me. It's going to help me to actually save and keep that money. Yeah, the nice thing about the cash management tracker is it's not like a budget where it's for a range. It is like an as of report. So literally you could come in any day of the month and say, as of today, October 13th, how much cash do I have? And is it enough to cover my current obligations? So like you could come in on 11/13/2020 and do the same thing. How frequently should you do it? So I would do this, like I said, I was really busy when I first came up with this. It was when I was in accounting school, college. And so I do remember learning about cash flow, but I think I did it like every 2 or 3 months. And what I would do is I would just add up the amount of emergency funds, my 1 month ahead, and then like how much money I needed to have saved up. And then that was like my number in my brain that I would subtract off of my bank balances. And so at the time, I really only had a checking account. I didn't really use my savings account, and I didn't have much for cash. So, if you know that you need $4,000 for your current obligations, your emergency funds, and whatever else, then you can just say, okay, every time I look at checking, I need to subtract $4,000 off of it. And that will give you your actual spendable money. So you don't even really need to come into the spreadsheet very often, except for updating, like if you have a new big purchase coming up and you want to make sure that you start setting money aside for that, then you would come in and say, okay, maybe I actually need $4,500. Okay, was that way too much? Hopefully that wasn't like way too much information on where your money goes after. But like I said, the ultimate purpose of this was saying what happens with your money after budgeting. So if you have savings left over, you want to make sure that you have a spreadsheet or some kind of log of how much money you are setting aside for sinking funds and for your emergency funds, that kind of thing. And just to reiterate, when I started saving my emergency funds, I literally started with $950. Like I've talked before about how we have like $24,000 in emergency funds now, but don't be intimidated by that. Start with a small amount in one of them, and then you can add a little as you go, kind of building that security for yourself. Unless you're like Andrew and he just doesn't even need an emergency fund. He'd rather invest it all. I know, fighting words. So we talked about cash versus accrual accounting and how to know when to enter your transactions, which month. Where does money go after budgeting? So that would be cash management if it went to savings. And we did my mid-month budget update. So let's do a work session. Unless you guys have any questions, we can do a quick 5-minute silent work session. Give me a chance to rest my voice and drink some tea. And let me see here. I need to stop sharing and share my other screen with the timer. Okay. Feel free to drop any questions in the comment field throughout the work session. Once we are done with the 5 minutes, we'll recap. I'll answer any questions that you have. I like to try to think of a few more tips for you guys during the session. So we'll go over those. And then the prompt for this one would be categorizing October spending. So just making sure you're up to date on categorizing each transaction that you've had. And then if you have time, feel free to move on to comparing actual versus budget to just get a sense of where you are for the month, if you are spending too much, or if you could ramp up spending, just the other alternative. All right, let's go ahead and get started in 3, 2, 1, go. Okay. All right, that's the end of work session 1. How did it go? What did you work on? Let's go ahead and talk. Okay, so I realized that I kind of rushed through the part where you analyze your actual spending so far compared to budget. So just to kind of recap that really quick, okay, I need to not click around like an insane person. So share screen for budget examples. Okay, so back to this spreadsheet, I went ahead and I repopulated my actual October spending month to date. So I do like to do a review by category, a review in total for the month, and then I do my annual review. So I just wanted to kind of break that out a little bit. So I do percent of budget, which you can ignore the formula. It's just actual spending divided by budget. So in this case, I had $700 budgeted for food. This is all of our food spending. We don't separate out like fun spending money for either my husband or I. So it's food, coffee, restaurants, fast food, drinks, alcohol, all that stuff. So we could have spent about 42% of the 700 so far. We've only spent 21% of our budget so far. So that's how we know we're under budget so far in that category. I'm a financial analyst. I don't know if you know that. I worked for like 5 years as a financial analyst at the last place that I worked. So I enjoy this part of it. I wonder if everybody enjoys it as much as I do. Hopefully it's pretty easy and straightforward for you guys. Let me know if you have questions. Andrew says, worked in getting Bacardi from the liquor store. Oh, that's what you did during the silent work session? Because that would be pretty funny. And is that for your decanter that you have on your background that is always empty? Worked on. Geez, Andrew, can't even type these days. That was really the only thing that I thought of during the session. Do you want to have a second session? Did you have any questions for Q&A type of thing? Mandaraj says I do. Okay, what do I do to? Is that to Bacardi or is that to a second work session? Not to put you on the spot, hopefully. But yeah, so I know 5 minutes isn't a lot of time. Sometimes it feels like so much time, and sometimes it's like, wow, that was not enough time to do anything. So yeah, it just kind of depends on what you guys want to do. If you want to let me know. Andrew says, I actually did, and yes, for the decanter, good. Because that decanter was looking pretty sad, Andrew, so get with it. The analysis, okay. Let's go ahead and do our second work session then. I wonder if I can just switch to this. No, nope, cannot. Sorry. Okay, so I'm going to have to go back here. Pull up the... Stop it. Okay, I apologize. Share screen. I want the timer this time. Hopefully you guys enjoy getting to listen to me talk to myself while I pull things up here. Okay, so for the second silent work session, once again, you can work on any task that you need to do. It's a good time to work on side hustle projects. It's a good time to do budgeting, research, make phone calls or emails. If you have like things that you need to do for your finances. The prompt for this one, if you are following along, will be to go ahead and compare your actual versus budget. So your actual spending versus how much you budgeted for the month. And feel free to change your budget. I'm a big believer that your budget is a tool for you. If it stops being helpful, change it. Don't just throw it away. So you also feel free to change your budget if you need to. Okay, with that, let's get into another one. 3, 2, 1, go. Okay, that is the end of the second work session. And I did think of a few things to share on the budgeting and actual and the cash management. Audrey, you had mentioned that you, let me see here, I've lost my comments. So while you were on, you said, working on making a list of my absolute expenses. Want to try and live off one check while it might be possible. Not going anywhere. It's amazing how little I'm spending on gas. Yes, I hear you. Like I said, our transportation so far this month has been zero, which, we could gas up the car, but I love this because aside from like being dinks, dual income, no kids, if you're not familiar with that, sounds like a weird thing to say otherwise, but aside from that, living off of half of our income was like the main thing that we did to pay off debt and save up to buy our house. So yeah, if you're able to do that, living on half your expenses, that's a big deal as far as like having money to, achieve your financial goals. So that's a really good goal to have and to track, like tracking what your percentage is of what your savings rate is each month. But now that I say that, I wonder, I think I have, so I shared this budget spreadsheet a while ago, and I just, honestly, I just threw it together. But I did have on here initially like a savings rate too. So savings rate is the amount of money saved divided by your income, I believe. I can I always forget which order it's in, but you do it until it makes sense. Because like if you make $1,000 and spend $500, it would be your savings total okay, maybe I got it right. Divided by income would be a savings rate of almost half, 46%. So that is correct. So having that little tracker on here is helpful as well. You can do it on your budget, but really you want to know what your actual savings rate is on your actual income and expenses. That's key. So what you're saying is if you're spending only spending one of your paychecks, you're essentially saying, I'm going to have a 50% savings rate, which freaking yay, that's awesome. The other thing I wanted to mention on cash management was Mandaraj, you had mentioned saving up for your IRA. Now, I don't know if that was like if you send money every month to it, like if you send a little bit each month, or if you save up and then make like the full IRA contribution. But that is one of the things that I would add on to this cash tracker. We do make our IRA contributions on an annual basis. So let's say for one person it's 6,000. Andrew will correct me if I'm wrong, I'm sure. Anyway, you would go ahead and say, okay, I am saving up, I want to have $6,000 to send to my IRA contribution. You don't have to fill it either. You could say you want to make a $500 IRA contribution and say 500. That way you remember that like you're saving up for it. So some of that money in your savings and checking account is going to go to your IRA contributions. And I will say one of the downsides of this cash tracker is, you add up all of your cash together. It doesn't really account for where the money is. So like if you happen to only have $20 in your checking, but maybe you had $3,000 in your savings account, like you might actually, hopefully filling this out is a trigger that, oh, hey, I only have 20 in checking. I need to transfer some over from savings. The theory here is that I personally don't care where the money is as long as I have it and it's somewhere and I can access it if I need or want to. But I did just want to caution you there, make sure that you look at it from that angle as well as like, is it in the right place? Excuse me. Okay. Don't know if I can. And yeah, that's why I was saying, there's nothing that says you have to. So just wanted to mention that. Usually all in on, oh, you are saying on April 15th. Okay, cool. Yeah, so then you would have the full contribution then, 6,000 on your cash tracker. So you'd be saving up towards that 6,000. Neat. Okay, I'm getting hoarse. So what's upcoming? We have how to get a raise. I am working on that content for probably posting next week. And then no spend challenge, still planned for October 20th through 25th. It'd be fun if you joined me. It's going to be free. It'll be posted. I'm going to try to post it here on YouTube. It will definitely be posted on my Instagram. It's the same account at Finance Rocks on Instagram. If you don't follow me on there, you could. And I've been pretty active on there, so sharing advice and tips that I haven't gotten made into videos yet. So also like this video if it was helpful to you. Feel free to put in the comments replay if you caught the replay, and I'll go ahead and let you go. I talked so much today, but thank you for following along. Nice to chat with you guys, and I'll see you on Sunday for the weekly planning session. And yeah, take care, guys. Bye.